Hey friends, ever feel invisible? Meet Pip, a tiny, rain-drenched tuxedo cat who knew only cold alleys and aching loneliness. Her world was shadows until one freezing night, a golden bakery light and a kind baker named Emmeline changed everything. What started with a trembling paw on a warm towel became a silent dance of trust that melted two lonely hearts. This is the story of how the smallest act of courage found the biggest warmth. If you believe in hope, second chances, and the magic of connection, you'll want to hear this. Stick around. And if stories that touch your soul matter to you, consider joining our family. Hit subscribe and tap that bell. Let's begin. Pip wasn't always called Pip. For a long time, she was simply a whisper of gray fluff drifting through the cracks of the bustling city. She was a tiny tuxedo cat, mostly soft charcoal with a pristine white bib, belly, and 4 mismatched white socks. Her eyes, wide and luminous as polished jade, held a perpetual look of cautious wonder touched by an undeniable loneliness. She lived in the interstitial spaces, beneath rusted fire escapes, behind overflowing dumpsters in the alley behind Madame Rosette's dress emporium, within the hollow husk of an ancient oak in the forgotten corner of Oakwood Park. She watched the world from a distance, children shrieking with laughter, couples walking hand in hand, families bustling home laden with groceries. The warmth emanating from lit windows seemed like a tangible thing to Pip, a golden glow she could almost touch, but never enter. Her own world was painted in shades of twilight gray and the chill of concrete. Her meow, when she dared use it, was a sound like a dandelion seed caught in a breeze, fragile and barely audible. People rarely noticed her. If they did, it was a fleeting glance, sometimes pitying, often indifferent. She'd pressed herself smaller, becoming a shadow among shadows. Her only companions were the scruttling beetles she chased but never caught, and the indifferent moon that cast her long, solitary silhouette on the pavement. One particularly biting November evening, a relentless drizzle slicked the city streets into mirrors reflecting fractured neon. Pip, soaked through and shivering violently, had retreated into the relative shelter of a narrow alleyway beside the Golden Crust, a small bakery known for its cinnamon rolls that perfumed the street each morning. Exhaustion weighed heavier than the water in her fur. She huddled against the cold brick wall, her green eyes fixed on the warm, buttery light spilling from the bakery's back window. The scent of yeast and sugar was intoxicating, a cruel reminder of the comfort just out of reach. Inside, Emmeline was wiping down counters. The last customer had left hours ago, and the familiar rhythm of closing up usually brought her peace. But tonight, a strange melancholy lingered. The rain drummed a lonely tattoo on the roof. As she reached to pull down the blinds on the back window, a movement caught her eye. A small, sodden heap of fur pressed against the bricks, trembling like the last leaf on an autumn branch. Emmeline's breath hitched. She'd seen strays before, of course, but this tiny creature looked impossibly fragile, a waterlogged ghost. Without thinking, she grabbed the thick, flour-dusted towel she'd been using and pushed open the heavy back door. The sound startled Pip. She tried to bolt, but her cold, stiffened limbs betrayed her, and she only managed a pathetic stumble. "Oh, little one," Emmeline murmured, her voice soft as the dough she kneaded. She didn't approach. Instead, she crouched low, making herself small, and gently laid the towel just inside the doorway, where the bakery's warmth pooled onto the damp concrete. "It's all right. Just a bit of warmth. No one will hurt you here." Pip froze, every muscle taut. The light from the doorway fell on Emmeline's face. kind eyes, flour dusting her cheek like misplaced snow. The scent of the towel was overwhelming, warm bread, safety, and something uniquely human that wasn't threatening. The radiating heat was an irresistible lure against the deep chill in her bones. Fear warred with desperate need. Slowly, trembling so hard her tiny frame vibrated, Pip inched forward, one white-socked paw at a time, her eyes never leaving Emmeline's face. It took an eternity, but finally she stepped onto the towel. The warmth was immediate, seeping through her soaked fur. A shuddering sigh escaped her. Emmeline remained perfectly still, her heart aching in her chest. She watched as the little cat curled impossibly tight into the center of the towel, burying her nose under her tail, seeking every scrap of offered warmth. She didn't close the door. She just sat there, cross-legged on the floor, letting the quiet rain and the tiny cat's trembling breaths fill the space. When Pip finally lifted her head, her jade eyes met Emmeline's. The fear was still there, but beneath it bloomed something else, a hesitant spark of recognition, a question. Slowly, deliberately, Pip blinked. Emmeline, remembering something she'd read long ago, blinked slowly back. A tiny tremor, different from the shivering, ran through Pip. She tucked her head back down, but this time, her breathing seemed just a fraction easier. That became their ritual. Every night when Emmeline closed the bakery, she'd open the back door crack and lay out the thick towel. Pip would appear, sometimes hesitant, sometimes quicker, always silent, and curl up on her island of warmth and scent. Emmeline would sit nearby, sometimes humming softly, sometimes just reading, radiating quiet companionship. She began leaving a small saucer of water, then a tiny bit of plain chicken. Pip would eat daintily, watching Emmeline with those luminous eyes. One frosty December evening, the towel was there, but Pip wasn't. Emmeline's heart sunk. Had something happened? Had the little ghost finally drifted away? She waited longer than usual, the cold air biting at her ankles. Just as despair began to creep in, a small gray shape materialized from the gloom. Pip approached, but instead of heading straight for the towel, she stopped a foot away from Emmeline. She looked up, gave a tiny, questioning chirp, a sound fuller than her previous whispers, and then, with infinite care, stretched out one delicate white-socked paw. She didn't quite touch Emmeline's knee, but she held it there, suspended in the air between them, an offering, a question. Tears pricked her eyes. She held her breath. Slowly, she extended her own hand, palm up, resting it gently on the floor beside her knee. Pip regarded it, then that tiny, tentative paw lowered, feather-light, onto Emmeline's warm skin. It was cold and damp, but the trust it carried was the warmest thing Emmeline had ever felt. That was the end of the little gray ghost. Pip still had her quiet moments, her love of watching the world from the high perch of the bakery's bookshelf, her fascination with dust motes dancing in sunbeams, but the profound loneliness had vanished, replaced by a serene contentment. She became Pip, short for Pipsqueak, Emmeline called her, laughing at our tiny meows that grew louder and more confident each day. She learned the rhythm of the bakery, the pre-dawn rumble of the ovens, the sweet symphony of morning customers, the quiet lull of the afternoons. She'd nap in sunbeams on the counter, much to the delight of regulars who'd ask for a cinnamon roll and a side of Pip, please, bat playfully at stray flower motes, and greet Emmeline with a headbutt against her ankle whenever she paused. Her favorite spot was curled on Emmeline's lap in the apartment above the bakery as evening fell, purring a sound like a tiny contented engine watching the city lights blink on outside the window she now shared. Pip wasn't a ghost anymore. She was a small, solid presence, a splash of soft gray and white against the warmed, flower-dusted world of the golden crust. Her jade eyes, once wide with lonely wonder, now held a deep, quiet knowing. She'd found her golden glow, her safe harbor, her person. And Emmeline, looking down at the tiny creature whose trust had mended a corner of her own quiet heart, knew she hadn't just rescued a cat. Pip, the little ghost who offered a paw in the frosty dark, had rescued her right back. The loneliness belonged to the alley now. Inside, there's only bread, warmth, and the quiet purr of belonging.
If this kind of story, where tiny acts of courage find giant warmth, touches something inside you, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button and tap the bell icon. It truly helps me bring you more heartfelt journeys like Pip's. Tell me in the comments, when did a small act of kindness change your world? Thanks for feeling it with me, friends. Stay emotional. Until the next story.